Welcome back to the Stephen A. Smith Show right here over the digital airwaves of YouTube and, of course, iHeartRadio. Now, let's get to the NBA and some talk between NBA greats, past and present. Most notably, the one and only Ant-Man himself, Anthony Edwards of the Minnesota Timberwolves, and the Hall of Famer Earvin Magic Johnson. Edwards was recently asked by the Wall Street Journal how his generation of basketball players compared to the ones that came before him. Look at this quote right here. Edwards replied by saying, quote, "I didn't watch it back in the day, so I can't speak on it," Edwards said. "They say it was tougher back then than it is now, but I don't think anybody had skill back then. Michael Jordan was the only one that really had skill. You know what I mean? So that's why when they saw Kobe Bryant, they were like, oh my God. But now everybody has skill," end quote. As for Magic Johnson, I recently sat down with him and asked him about Anthony Edwards' comments last week in Las Vegas. Here's what the Magic Man himself had to say. Take a listen.
Just said the other day that there really wasn't any skilled players in the NBA back in the day outside of Michael Jordan. That's what he said. Your response to that, Earvin Magic Johnson?
Well, you know, I don't never respond to a guy that's never won a championship. There's not nothing to really say. He didn't win a college championship. I don't know if he even won a high school championship. So,
damn. I mean, that's Earvin Magic Johnson that said that. Before I give you my opinion, however, he wasn't the only one. He wasn't the only champion, the only national champion in college, the only NBA champion in the NBA, the only Hall of Famer. He wasn't the only one from back in the day that had a response to Ant-Man himself, Anthony Edwards, and what he had to say. Look at this from the great Isaiah Thomas himself. First of two tweets. Number one, propaganda works, so be careful what you choose to believe. That was the first one. Here's the second one. They look faster today. He's talking about today's athletes. They look faster today because of the rule change, which prohibits holding and hand checking to impede progress. In football, for example, wide receivers can play in the middle of the field without fear and rack up more yardage. Today, the rules favor quarterbacks and receivers, end quote. Let me just give a little advice to Anthony Edwards. First of all, Anthony Edwards is one of my top two favorite players in the NBA to watch. Nobody comes before Steph Curry to me. It's my favorite player to watch. I just think that he is the greatest shooter God has ever created, okay? When I think about Ant-Man, he ain't Jordan, he ain't Kobe, he ain't Vince Carter, but he on the way. He on the way in terms of what he does in a game. I love Ant-Man. But you show your youth, my young brother. Whippersnapper, young whippersnapper, wet behind the ears, breath smelling like Similac. You understand? Like Jerome used to say on Martin, okay? That's what you sounded like. Isaiah Thomas, maybe the most skilled small guard in the history of basketball. Some people would look at now, you know, look at Steph Curry. It's a little bit different now. They would look at Allen Iverson before that. They'd look at Nate Archibald before Isaiah Thomas. Nate Archibald was skilled, but Isaiah Thomas definitely was skilled, okay? John Stockton was skilled. Charles Barkley was skilled. Larry Bird was skilled. Dr. J. Julius Erving was skilled. The late, great Bill Walton was skilled. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was skilled. Fast forward a little bit more than that, because you in your early 20s, Anthony Edwards. Well, it's the year 2024, so I get it. So let's go to the 90s. Vince Carter was in the 90s. Tracy McGrady was in the 90s and into the 2000s. Kobe Bryant was that dude. Okay, we can't negate that. We can't escape that. Tim Duncan, since I'm bringing up skilled big men, excuse me, Mr. Fundamentals. I mean, what he brought to the table, that was skilled. There's a whole bunch of skilled basketball players that have been in the National Basketball Association. Now, I didn't expect Magic to get that raw, but Hall of Famers who are champions get to do that. And so what he's talking about, whatever your skill set may be, is it enough for you to win chips, to wear rings? That's what Magic was bringing up. Who's going to disagree with that? You know, one of the things that I've gotten into on several occasions, I've had the pleasure to be honest and privileged to get checked by the great Michael Jordan himself. And I talked about Magic, and I remember one time I threw out the debate about Magic Johnson or Steph Curry, who you got as the all-time great point guard, because in my mind, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, excuse me, let's pay attention to something here. When we're talking about point guard, a quintessential point guard, that's easily Irvin Magic Johnson. But if you're talking about impact in terms of affecting the prowess of the players around them, which is what a point guard usually does, you don't just look at them as a strict facilitator, which is what somebody like Eddie Johnson for NBA Radio, who had a really good career in the NBA, classifies as a true point guard. He doesn't consider that to be Steph Curry. He considers that to be Irvin Magic Johnson. I get it. Michael Jordan did not want to hear that. Michael Jordan said, what the hell wrong with you? You lost your ever-loving mind? There is no greater point guard in the history of basketball than Irvin Magic Johnson. And by the way, Isaiah Thomas was number 2. And we know what level of friction him and Isaiah Thomas has had throughout the years, dating back to the 80s. So it now spans about 40 years. It don't matter. It doesn't stop Michael Jordan from stating that Isaiah Thomas only has one point guard better than him in the history of basketball, and that would happen to be Irvin Magic Johnson, who, by the way, was 6'9", while Isaiah Thomas was 6'1". So let's make sure we remember all of these things. You're young, you're entitled to your opinion, you're a baller, what have you. If you're Anthony Edwards, here's what you need to do. You need to prioritize winning the chip so you can have a conversation like that with Magic Johnson. Because Magic Johnson said he ain't even got to listen to you. He don't even have to pay attention. And he's imploring the audience not out there not to pay attention because the brother don't have no chips. It's not your fault. But the Minnesota Timberwolves as an organization doesn't even have an appearance in the NBA Finals, let alone victories in them. When you make a statement like that, you got to ask somebody. Now, as an aside, if you're Irvin Magic Johnson, my man, who I did the event for at a casino outside of Las Vegas last Wednesday, when I asked him that question, you do have to take something else into consideration. If you're Magic, according to what he proclaimed, Luke Longley and folks like that deserve to have more of a say about Magic Johnson or Michael Jordan or anybody else than an Ant-Man. Let's pump the brakes on that. Can't agree with that. But it also applies to somebody as great as Charles Barkley. Let me not forget amongst the champions that he talked about that lacked skill, Hakeem Olajuwon would be included in that, one of the most skilled big men to ever play the game. He's a 2-time NBA champion, by the way, but I digress. Charles Barkley wouldn't be allowed to talk about guys like Magic Johnson, according to Magic Johnson's rules. Patrick Ewing, Reggie Miller, Chris Mullin, Karl Malone, John Stockton, Kevin Johnson, point guard Phoenix Suns, went to the finals with Phoenix, with Barkley and Dan Marley and those boys against Jordan. Kevin Johnson could ball long before he became the mayor of Sacramento and was running his own businesses, successfully, I might add. How about the glove Gary Payton? How about Karl Malone? They don't have, well, they got, Gary Payton got it later, playing with Shaq and stuff. But essentially, Mitch Richmond, run TMC in Golden State. Tim Hardaway. I'm just saying, there's plenty of dudes that don't have chips. They got opinions, though, and it should be respected. I'm just saying, Magic. I'm just saying, but his point about Ant-Man, Anthony Edwards, was valid. He really was.